Okay, it really makes you think, doesn't it? What happens when the very technology we designed to make us safer, more efficient, well, what happens when it starts creating its own challenges, its own unique, sometimes really surprising issues?
Yeah, it's a fascinating kind of paradox, and that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Right. Our deep dive is taking us straight into the cockpit of modern aircraft. We're drawing insights from Captain Ashutosh Chopra, a real expert here, specifically his Commercial Pilot's Handbook.
Yeah.
We're really zeroing in on that chapter, handling automation.
That's right. And our mission today really is to shed light on that complex dance, between human pilots and the super advanced automation you find in cockpits now. It's often pretty counterintuitive. We're going to look at the benefits, sure, but also the hidden traps and, maybe most importantly, the strategies pilots need to truly master these machines.
So the pilot stays the boss, basically.
Exactly, not the other way around. And hopefully you'll get a shortcut to being really well informed on this. It's more complex, more interesting than it looks at first glance. Lots of facts, insights you might not expect.
Okay, so let's start with the upside. The promise of automation. I mean, the advantages are huge, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Captain Chopra points out how it's, significantly cut down on pilot fatigue. Think about those long-haul flights. Mm-hmm. It brings incredible accuracy to managing the flight path.
Yeah.
Helps catch those tiny errors before they snowball.
Yeah.
Improves passenger comfort, smoother rides, and maybe one of the biggest things, it's actually reduced weather minimums. Flights can operate safely in conditions that used to mean staying on the ground.
Totally. And, as aircraft get more complex and the skies get more crowded, there's this growing need, almost an inevitability, to rely on this automation. Plus, the systems themselves are just so incredibly reliable now compared to, say, decades ago. Failures are rare.
But, and there's always a but, isn't there?
Yeah. That very success, that reliability, it kind of inadvertently creates a different set of problems centered squarely on the human element.
Right. That's where we get to what Captain Chopra calls the human in the loop problem. The tech is amazing, but how pilots interact with it.
Yeah.
Well, that's created these challenges that he says persist and shall probably never go away.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's this real concern that too much automation or maybe over-reliance on it leads to pilots losing confidence in their manual skills and maybe weirdly overconfidence in what the automation can actually handle.
Yeah, trusting it even when it's not really designed for a specific situation.
Exactly.
And you see how this plays out. It can mean pilots lose self-confidence, especially if the automation does something unexpected. It sort of misbehaves. And that hesitation, that lack of confidence, can mean they don't intervene when they should. In really demanding moments, that can lead to, adverse flight states, the aircraft getting into a dangerous spot.
And it's not just about confidence, right? He always talks about this heads down syndrome. I thought that was a great term.
It really is.
Picture this. Both pilots, heads down, fiddling with the flight management system, the FMS.
Yeah.
That's the main computer, basically.
For navigation, flight planning?
Right. And they're programming stuff that honestly could be done with less automation or even just handled manually.
So they're managing the automation instead of managing the flight path.
Precisely. It shows this shift. Like, automation is the master you have to submit to, not the slave you need to master.
That's a really powerful way to put it, and it brings up a critical point, especially when you hear this surprising fact. Think about the really demanding situations. TCAS warnings the collision avoidance system.
Okay.
Unreliable flight data, wind shear, GPWS warnings, that's the ground proximity warning.
Terrain alerts, yeah.
Stall recovery, even recovering from a jet upset. Every single one of those requires pilots to disconnect the automation and fly manually.
Wow. So the absolute hardest, most critical moment
are handled by hand.
That really reframes things, doesn't it? If the toughest stuff needs manual control, why does this complacency, this heads down thing, happen during the more routine parts of the flight? Is it just training? Or psychology?
It's probably a mix. I mean, the sheer reliability is a big factor. It can lull you into this, what Chopra calls the complacency trap. You just don't monitor the flight path quite as vigilantly. He really hammers the need for pilots to deeply ingrain those monitoring procedures, make them totally second nature.
You can picture it happening so easily, like the example of the unfollowed waypoint. You punch in the next point, but forget to actually engage LNAV, the lateral navigation mode.
Right.
So the plane just keeps flying straight. And if the map display is zoomed out, you might not notice for ages.
Or the missed altitude change. You dial in the new altitude ATC gave you, but forget to hit VNAV or level change to actually make the plane climb or descend.
And you only realize when ATC calls back, asking why you're still at the old level. Simple mistakes, really. But complacency lets them happen, even with all the tech.
And that complacency, it often feeds into our reluctance to jump in and fly manually. Pilots get dependent on the automation, their manual skills might degrade a bit. Chopra points out some of this is even, systemic. Company policies might push automation use. Maybe there's a fear of getting flagged for manual flying. He really disagrees that just doing simulator checks is enough to keep those manual skills sharp.
So it sounds like even with these super smart systems, you still need that basic human skill, that intuition, when things get tricky.
Absolutely.
But then there's the flip side, right? Jumping back to manual control too quickly. At the first tiny sign, the automation isn't perfect.
Yeah, that's the other extreme, and that can actually make things worse, lead to bigger deviations than if you'd maybe tried a different automation mode first.
So how do you find that balance? Intervening too late versus too soon? That seems like the million-dollar question.
It really is. And often the answer isn't just instantly grabbing the controls. It might be reverting to a lower level of automation first, trying something simpler before going fully manual. Part of the problem, he argues, comes down to training gaps, knowledge gaps. The manuals, the computer training, even the simulator sessions. They often don't cover every single subtle way automation can fail or act weirdly.
Which leads straight to losing situational awareness. You just don't know what the plane is doing or why.
Exactly. And his solution is pretty interesting. Self-visualization. Basically, armchair flying.
Mentally rehearsing.
Yeah. Mentally walk through failure scenarios. Practice what you do, like, okay, VNAV quits in cruise, what happens next? Does it hold altitude? Does it switch to CWS, control wheel steering? You need that answer before it happens for real.
So you're not surprised in the moment.
Right, and that ties directly into understanding the automation's logic. His advice is pretty blunt. RTFM.
Read the fine manual.
Yeah. Every manufacturer programs their system differently. Pilots can't change the logic, but knowing it keeps you out of trouble. It's often in the fine print of the flight crew operating manual, the FCOM. Stuff people might skip because, let's be honest, who reads every word of every manual?
Especially those massive FCOMs.
Exactly. But here, it's crucial. It's non-negotiable.
That really hammers home the responsibility. Can you give an example? Like, we're not knowing that fine print could really bite you.
Sure. Take a go-around on a certain aircraft type. If you don't realize that hitting the TOGA takeoff go-around switches might actually make the plane try to follow the track you were just on instead of the missed approach path you intended to fly, well, that could be dangerous.
Okay. Yeah.
Or misunderstanding vertical speed mode. VS, you want to climb, so you set a higher altitude, but then you fiddle with the VS knob and set, say, minus 1,000 feet per minute. The plane could actually start descending. Yeah, and it might even bust speed limits doing it. Another one. On some non-precision approaches in certain planes, you have to recycle the flight directors, those guidance bars on the screen. If you don't, they might disappear during a mode change, right when you need them most.
These are subtle things, but with potentially huge consequences if you don't know the system's logic.
Precisely. And it gets worse because, as Chopra reminds us, when you're stressed, your ability to recall information just plummets.
Right.
Which makes that visualization, that understanding the logic during calm times, even more critical.
Okay, so how do pilots master these controls then? Let's talk about actually engaging and disengaging the automation. Sounds simple, but...
Yeah, rushing it is risky. You might fail to engage it properly or engage something unintended, and your situational awareness drops while you're focused on the panel.
So the prevention is?
Wait. Pretty much. Don't even try engaging automation unless the aircraft is stable, fully under control, trimmed, steady flight.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And disengaging.
Same idea. Be deliberate. Note your current thrust, your flight path before you click it off. Be ready for it to be out of trim. You need to be prepared to instantly hold the path, retrim, maybe reset the thrust manually, and know how to reset the whole system if needed, like recycling those flight director switches on certain Boeings, for example.
Okay. Now, what about this semi-engaged state he mentions? That sounds dangerous.
It's a major source of confusion, like having the autopilot off, but the auto throttle still on, controlling the engines,
yeah.
Or the other way around.
Mixing manual and automatic.
Exactly. If one system then acts up, you could lose control or end up way too fast or slow. Now, some planes, like the A320, are designed with auto throttle meant to be always on, but even then you have to monitor it constantly.
So no half measures.
Right.
Yeah.
He says there's no half-baked middle path. If you're flying manually, take full control. Fly it like there's no automation helping at all.
Which really leads into needing an active mental model, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You can't just switch on the autopilot and mentally check out.
No way. The thought process has to be active. Okay, autopilot's engaged. Is the aircraft doing precisely what I expect based on the charts, the plan, the clearance, altitude, speed, track?
And if not?
Then you need to intervene. Maybe select a more appropriate automation mode to correct it, or, if needed, take manual control right then and there.
And a key part of that is noticing the FMA, right? The flight mode annunciator.
Absolutely critical. That little display tells you exactly what modes the automation is in. It's the pilot flying's job to announce any changes, speed, heading select, whatever. And both pilots, the flying and the monitoring, must cross-check it.
He gives that go-around example again. Imagine the pitch mode stays stuck in glide slope because the TOGA command didn't register properly.
Right. If you don't spot that on the FMA, you might not climb steeply enough. Huge terrain clearance risk.
So constant vigilance on that little display.
And anytime the pilot flying touches the AFDS panel, the autopilot controls they need to announce what they're about to do before they do it. The pilot monitoring checks it, confirms it. He even suggests pointing to make sure you're grabbing the heading knob, not the speed knob, by mistake.
Little things that prevent big errors.
Exactly.
What about tactile feedback? He mentions keeping hands on the controls.
Yeah, that's huge. Especially lower down, near the ground, or during transitions like level-offs or turns. Keeping your hands lightly on the yoke and throttles gives you instant feedback. You feel what the automation is doing.
So you can intervene faster if needed.
Precisely. Like in that go-around scenario again. Your hands should instinctively be moving with the expected aircraft motion, right hand pushing throttles forward, left hand easing back on the yoke for the climb. If the plane responds as expected, great. If not, your hands are already in position to make it happen immediately. No delay.
Okay, this brings up an interesting point. False alarms. How do you handle those? It sounds tricky.
It is tricky, because ignoring what seems like a bogus warning can be incredibly dangerous. It might be the first hint of a real system malfunction, even if the immediate alert seems wrong.
Like that B-737 crash in Amsterdam in 2009.
A stark example, yeah. The auto throttle brought the engines to idle way too early because of a faulty radio altimeter, the sensor measuring height off the ground. But earlier, the same faulty system had triggered what the crew likely thought was a false alarm about the landing gear not being down. They ignored that earlier warning.
And that false alarm was actually the clue that the altitude sensor was unreliable.
Exactly. It was a critical indicator of the deeper problem that ultimately caused the crash. You can't just dismiss things easily.
And the final pitfall area.
Oh.
FMC programming errors. The good old garbage in, garbage out.
Yep. Crew making mistakes punching data into the flight management system. Wrong performance figures, wrong runway, wrong altitude constraints.
How do you guard against that?
Discipline. Do all FMC programming calmly, without rushing. Cross-check everything with the other pilot before you hit execute. And if ATC gives you clearance the FMC isn't really set up for, any workaround you use has to be really well understood by both pilots. No guessing.
Okay, so with all that context, all those potential issues laid out, Captain Chopra then offers solutions, right? These 13 rules.
Yeah, he distills it all down into 13 practical rules. It's basically his philosophy for handling automation effectively, making sure the human stays in charge.
Let's touch on a few key ones, because they sound like they have lessons beyond just aviation. Rule number 1 seems fundamental. Fly the aircraft.
It's the bedrock. No excuses. The pilot flying flies. The pilot monitoring monitors. Doesn't touch controls unless told. It's about maintaining that direct, ultimate control, regardless of what the automation is doing.
It puts the human back at the center, even with all the tech.
Absolutely. And Rule 2 builds on that.
Yeah.
Choose the appropriate level of automation. Don't just max it out by default. Think about the situation. Maintain awareness. Be flexible.
Right. And then Rules 5 and 13 basically say, if things go wrong.
Back to Rule 1. If the automation fails, if you're confused about the modes, revert. Fly the aircraft manually. It's the ultimate safety net, acknowledging that human skill is the final backstop.
Rule 7 jumps out at me about communication. Announce everything you do on the AFDS panel before you do it. PM confirms, PF points.
Super important. It's that rigorous cross-checking loop. Prevents misunderstandings, catches slips before they matter. Critical in any high-stakes team environment, really.
Definitely. And Rule 9 being extra alert during transitions, like leveling off or capturing a course. hands ready on controls.
Yeah, active monitoring. Those transition phases are when automation might do something slightly unexpected or when you need to be sharpest. Be ready to intervene instantly.
Rule 11 tackles those FMCers directly. If something weird happens because of bad data, don't try to fix the computer while flying complex maneuvers.
Right. Fly manually or use a simpler automation mode. Sort out the programming when workload allows. And crucially, never both pilots heads down at the same time. Below 10,000 feet, only the pilot monitoring reprograms, and everything gets double-checked.
And Rule 12 brings in the human factors: stress, fatigue.
Yeah, be self-aware, know your own state, and be aware of your crewmates. If workload is high, if people are tired, you need extra vigilance monitoring the automation. Acknowledge the human vulnerabilities.
So when you pull it all together, what's the overarching message? The golden rule.
It boils down to this. Automation is there to help you. It should reduce your workload, make you more aware of the situation, not less. If it's not doing that, if it's increasing workload, causing confusion, reducing your situational awareness, then something's wrong. You need to reassess, maybe change the automation level. And if that doesn't fix it, immediately fall back to basics. Rule 1, fly the aircraft. Have the other pilot monitor you intensely. Remember, the pilot is in charge. You control the automation. It doesn't control you.
So wrapping up this deep dive, that core insight really resonates.
Yeah.
The pilot is in command. It's about mastering the automation, understanding its logic, its limits,
Right.
and never hesitating to take back manual control when needed. The goal isn't to become an expert automation manager. It's to manage the aircraft's flight path effectively, using automation as a tool.
Exactly. And the real sign you've got it right, according to Chopra, you should never find yourself asking, what's it doing now?
Huh. Love that. Now, obviously we focused on the cockpit here, but listening to this, you have to wonder, how did these principles apply elsewhere?
Mm-hmm.
The dangers of over-reliance on tech, the need to really understand the logic of the tools we use, keeping that active mental model.
Mm-hmm.
How does that play out with the complex systems or tech in your own life or work? Are you always the boss of your technology? Or sometimes does it kind of take the lead without you even noticing?
That's a really interesting thought to leave people with, something to definitely ponder.